can make a way. Hey, hey, so humble yourselves and pray and guard His Torah. Obey each day. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Hoshiana, Hoshiana. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
And Moshe said, Hear, O Yisrael, Yahweh your Elohim, Yahweh is one, and you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, with all your might. And these words which I am commanding you today shall be in your heart, and you shall impress them upon your children. And shall speak of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way, when you lie down and when you rise up, and shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom to everyone worshiping with us at home. We're really glad you're here, wherever you are joining us today. It's a blessing to be here on Yahweh's Shabbat. And this week we're going to spend a little more time talking about the complete armor of Elohim that we started last week. And I've decided to call this message, Watch Your Topknot. Now, this is a term that was used by early pioneers and explorers who were discovering the Americas. A topknot is a tuft of hair growing on the top of the head. Though not a universal practice, there were some natives in the Americas who had a custom of relieving their enemies of such a tuft. Watch your topknot was a farewell, which means protect your head. Don't get scalped. It's akin to when we say, watch your step or watch your back. Be careful or something like that. And watch your topknot is quite relevant to our study today as a caution. We should never lose sight of the fact that we are at war. Right? And whether you like it or not, we are at war. It is not a war where you can flee to a neutral country. It's a war of both global and heavenly proportions, and everyone is on one side or the other. It's as simple as that. And though you may have chosen to be on the winning side, which is the army of Yahweh, right, that does not mean that there will not be a fight. There are many defectors who will go over willingly to the other side of the enemy. And then there are others who go, some go by temptation and some by deception. I suppose we all wind up on the wrong side of the firing line from time to time. Amen. That's because we fall for the schemes of the devil. I thought that protecting the head was relevant because today we're going to start at the top and move downward as we examine the armor of Elohim. This means we will first be talking about the helmet of deliverance and the breastplate of righteousness. So let's turn together to Ephesians chapter 6. I'll be reading from the 1998 ISR edition. And we're going to be on page 1136. Ephesians chapter 6. We're going to start reading verse 11. Put on the complete armor of Elohim for you to have power to stand against the schemes of the devil. Because we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against authorities, against the world rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual matters of wickedness in the heavenlies. Because of this, take up the complete armor of Elohim, so that you have power to withstand in the wicked day, and having done all to stand, stand then, having girded your waist with truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having fitted your feet with the preparation of the good news of peace, above all, having taken up the shield of belief with which you shall have power to quench all the burning arrows of the wicked one. Also, take also the helmet of deliverance and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of Elohim, praying at all times with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, watching in all perseverance and supplication for all the set apart ones. There are 6 items mentioned in the complete armor of Elohim. How many of these items would you say are primarily offensive in their device? Well, there's only one. That would be the sword of the Spirit. 5 of the 6 items are primarily for defense. Now, Satan is a mighty adversary who is not scared of the likes of you or me. Satan and his minions are expert swordsmen themselves. And they have used the word of Elohim to cut down many a believer. Don't forget, YHWH was engaged by Satan in such a battle. But YHWH is our example, and he is fitted with the complete armor of Elohim. By ourselves, we're unable to survive a sword fight with the devil. He will cut you to pieces. He can. And that is exactly why the complete armor of Elohim covers us from head to foot. All right? It's primarily defensive in its application. And we need all that protection when we come up against an enemy like Hasatan. All right? So that we can stand against the schemes of the devil. The helmet protects the head and the brain, while the breastplate covers the heart and other vital organs. You might have a hard time of it, but you can lose an arm or a leg and live. But if you lose the brain or the heart or the kidneys, etc., you will die. All of these are interrelated in Hebrew thought, and they work in conjunction with one another. We know that they are interrelated and depend on one another physically, but they think and feel together as well. Have you ever been anxious or afraid and feel your kidneys draw up in your back? Yeah. Have you ever gotten so angry that you felt your brain draw up? I have. While your heart pounds in your chest, all right? Your heart pounds in your chest. Or been sad and felt heaviness in your chest. Yeah. Or felt joy and poked your chest out because of the gladness that you felt in your heart. That's because all these things work together in our being. When YHWH quoted the first great command, he made it clear that the mind was understood to be part of all your everything. Don't have to turn here. Just one verse. Mark 12 and verse 30 says, "And you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, and with all your being, and with all your mind, and with all your strength." This is the first command. You see, these are all tied together. And it is vital to our existence with Yahweh that we keep these things protected. As was mentioned in our last message, the adversary deploys WMDs against the people of Elohim. Remember what WMDs are? Weapons of mass deception. Yes, they will ultimately lead to destruction, but he uses weapons of mass deception. That's why you need to protect your head. Satan usually gains entrance through our minds. That's why we need to not only put on the helmet of deliverance and the breastplate of righteousness, but we need to know what they are. So let's look together at Exodus 15. Shemot chapter 15. We're going to start reading in verse 1. It's going to be on page 72. Exodus 15 and verse 1. Then Moshe and the children of Yisrael sang this song to Yahweh and spoke, saying, I sing to Yahweh, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he has thrown into the sea. Yah is my strength and song, and he has become my deliverance. And what kind of helmet is it? Helmet of deliverance, that's right. He is my El, and I praise him, Elohim of my father, and I exalt him. Yahweh is a man of what? Battle. Yahweh is his name. The helmet of deliverance means Yahweh on the brain. Yahweh. Thinking on Yahweh as sovereign. Knowledge of his ways and wisdom and discernment, so as to realize his desire for us in our lives. Also, as we turn to this next passage, I want you to note how many times you see the word guard in these next verses. Guard is another word that defines defensiveness or protection. Deuteronomy chapter 6. This was our main text last week. We're going to start reading in verse 1, though, and be on page 191. Deuteronomy, Devarim, chapter 6, verse 1. And this is the command, the laws and the right rulings which Yahweh your Elohim has commanded to teach you to do in the land which you are passing over to possess, so that you fear Yahweh your Elohim to, what are those next four words? Guard all his laws. That's number one right there. That's the first one. And his commands which I command you, you and your son and your grandson, all the days of your life, so that your days are be prolonged. And you shall hear, O Yisrael, and shall guard, that's two, to do, that it might be well with you, and that you increase greatly, as Yahweh, Elohim of your fathers, has spoken to you, in a land flowing with milk and honey. Hear, O Yisrael, Yahweh our Elohim, Yahweh is one, and you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, and with all your being, and with all your might. And these words which I am commanding you today shall be in your what? Heart. All right, there's your breastplate of righteousness. All right, the word of Yahweh in your heart. And you shall impress them upon your children, and shall speak of them when you sit in the house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up, and shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. His ways in front of your mind, the helmet of deliverance, Yahweh on the brain. And you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. And it shall be when Yahweh your Elohim brings you into the land of which he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Yitzchak, to Jacob, to give you great and good cities which you did not build, and houses filled with all kinds of goods which you did not fill, and wells dug which you did not dig, and vineyards and olive trees which you did not plant. And you shall eat and be satisfied. Be on guard. That's 3. Lest you forget. That's why you need to protect your head. Who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim from the house of bondage. Fear Yahweh your Elohim and serve him and swear by his name. Do not go after other mighty ones, the mighty ones of the peoples who are all around you. For Yahweh your Elohim is a jealous El in your midst. Lest the displeasure of Yahweh your Elohim burn against you, then he shall destroy you from the face of the earth. Do not try Yahweh your Elohim as you tried him in Massah. Diligently guard, there's number 4, the commands of Yahweh your Elohim and his witnesses and his laws which he commanded you. And you shall do what is right and good in the eyes of Yahweh, and it shall be well with you. And you shall go in and possess the good land of which Yahweh swore to your fathers to drive out all your enemies from before you, as Yahweh has spoken. When your son asks you in time to come, saying, what is the meaning of the witnesses and the laws and the right rulings which Yahweh our Elohim has commanded you? And then you shall say to your son, we were slaves of Pharaoh in Mitzrayim, and Yahweh brought us out of Mitzrayim with a strong hand. And Yahweh sent signs and wonders, great and grievous, upon Mitzrayim, upon Pharaoh, and upon all his household before our eyes. And He brought us out from there to bring us in, to give us the land of which He swore to our fathers. And Yahweh commanded us to do all these laws, to fear Yahweh our Elohim, for our good always, to keep us alive as it is today. And it is righteousness for us when we guard, there's number 5, to do all His commands before Yahweh our Elohim as He has commanded us. Now, I don't know if it's coincidence or not, but it is interesting that there are 6 pieces of the complete armor of Elohim, and 5 of them are defensive. And in this little passage that we read right here, it says guard 5 times. Protect, 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 protect. So the word of Yahweh, which Paul defines as the sword of the Spirit, is actually woven throughout the entire armor, and it is to be in our hearts. And it is righteousness when we guard to do all that He's commanded us. And we are to protect that and to keep it in our hearts. What happens when Satan gains access to our minds? He afflicts us with mental disorders, which infects our minds with something known as stinking thinking. Stinking thinking. This leads to another malady that I've heard called truth decay. But we'll talk about that more when we get into the part of the armor where we gird ourselves with truth. One of the main reasons that it's so important that we protect ourselves with the helmet of deliverance and the breastplate of righteousness is because without those things, we become especially susceptible to fatal attacks by Hasatan. You see, this is a matter of life and death. Okay? Eternal life and death. And you can have learning and still be suffering from stinking thinking. Learning and knowledge is not the same thing. All right? Turn with me to Hosea chapter 4. And Hosea chapter 4, page 600. I'm going to read one verse here. Hosea chapter 4, verse 6. My people have perished for lack of knowledge, because they have rejected knowledge. I reject you from being priests for me. Since you have forgotten the Torah of your Elohim, I also forget your children. All right, and next, 2 Timothy chapter 3. We're going to start reading in verse 6. 2 Timothy, we're on page 1157, verse 6. For among them are those who creep into the households and captivate silly women, loaded down with sins, led away by various lusts, always learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. All right? Now, this brings us back to the oldest trick in the book and why we need the complete armor of Elohim. All right? And before we turn to Genesis chapter 3, because we're going to turn there, let's turn to James 1. We're going to start reading in verse 13, but I want you to pay particular attention to verse 14. James, Yaakov, chapter 1, verse 13. Let no one say when he is enticed, I am enticed by Elohim. For Elohim is not enticed by evil matters, and He entices no one. But each one is enticed when he is drawn away by his own desires and trapped. Then, when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it has been accomplished, brings forth death. Now, I want you to keep your finger there in James. And I want you to keep in mind what we just read for a moment. And I got this question for you. Don't you suppose that Adam and Hawa had a relationship with Yahweh that was closer than the one that most people have with Yahweh? I think so. He walked in the garden with them and he spoke with them, one-on-one or one-on-two. They got first-hand instruction, amen? All right, so let's look at Bereshit chapter 3. Genesis chapter 3. I'm going to start reading in verse 2. We'll be on page 3. And the serpent was more crafty. I'm sorry, we'll start reading in verse 1. And the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field which Yahweh Elohim had made. And he said to the woman, is it true that Elohim has said, do not eat of every tree of the garden? Now, I want you to notice that Hawa picks up the sword of the Spirit right here, which is what? What's the sword of the Spirit? Word of Elohim. And the woman said to the serpent, we are to eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, Elohim has said, do not eat of it, nor touch it, lest you die. So she basically tells the serpent, hey buddy, you got your facts all wrong. All right? She then proceeds to straighten him out with the sword of the Spirit, informing him what the word of Elohim is. Satan knows what the word says, but he's not really interested in what the word says beyond how he can use it to deceive you and me. But Hawa did not have the helmet of deliverance. Neither did she have on the breastplate of righteousness. And that made her vulnerable to what happened next. Genesis 3 verse 4. Now I'm going to embellish this just a little as we go along. Not adding to, just embellishing. All right. Verse 4. And the serpent said to the woman, no, sister, I'm afraid you got your facts wrong. Somebody's giving you some bad info. You shall not certainly die. That's what that implies, isn't it? All right. For Elohim knows that in the day that you eat of it, your eyes shall be open, and you shall be like Elohim, knowing good and evil. Now, don't lose your place here, but flip back to James 14. Okay? Took my finger out. All right, James 14. I'm sorry, James 1:14. I'm sorry. Oh, you've got the incomplete scriptures. James 1, verse 14. Don't lose your place, but flip back to James 1:14. We're going back and forth just a little bit here, right? But each one is enticed when he is drawn away by his own desires. Then, when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it has been accomplished, brings forth death. All right, now let's flip back to Genesis chapter 3. We're going to start reading in verse 6. Yes, we're going to come back to James, yeah. And see, evidently, Hawa dropped the shield of belief as well, which is to quench all the burning arrows of the wicked one. Okay? And it says in verse 6, and the woman saw, in other words, she beheld. She considered it in her mind that it was true. And the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise. And she took of its fruit and ate, and she also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Turn back to James chapter 1, verse 15. And when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it has been accomplished, brings forth death. So, Hawa was unable to stand against the schemes of the devil in the garden with just the sword of the Spirit. All right. What makes you or me think that we can stand any better against the schemes of the devil when we have failed to put on our defensive equipment and all we have is a sword, while the devil has the sword and fiery arrows and WMDs. You won't. And neither will I. And if we don't suit up with a complete armor, we're not going to make it. We must be proactive and ever vigilant. Always aware that there could be an ambush at any time and from any direction. Debbie and I decided to take a little getaway picnic for our 30th wedding anniversary. That was a long time ago, wasn't it? And took in a little sightseeing at a famous natural wonder site in Tennessee. Been a little vague here because there's lots of those in Tennessee, but there was a glass blowing shop there and a man making all sorts of wonderful pieces of artwork. He was a very talented individual. It was pretty stuff, wasn't it, Meemaw? I spoke with him while in his shop trying to learn what I could about his craft. I returned in a little while to inquire of him how much he would charge us to make a glass menorah with Yahweh on it. As we spoke, I discovered that he was familiar with the name. He said that he had noticed the menorah on my shirt. Then he said, "You don't look Jewish." I said, "I'm not, as far as I know." And I told him a little bit about our beliefs. And he said, "I'm Jewish." And I said, "Really? You don't look Jewish?" "I'm German," he said. "I converted to Judaism. I just love the religion." He repeated that statement at least one or two other times during the conversation. I just love the religion. So we started talking about this thing and that thing in the Torah. And he said, "I'm a Reformed Jew. We don't do all the things that Orthodox Jews do." And I told him that that we hold to the laws regarding the clean and the unclean meats. And he said he didn't keep up with the food laws. I used to have to travel a lot in my job, and that made keeping up with the food laws just too hard to do. Besides, my wife is a Southern Baptist. I thought this was a strange position for a convert to Judaism who just loves the religion. All right? Yahweh says that we're supposed to abominate the carcasses of these animals. Do not touch them and certainly do not eat them. That sounded like some stinking thinking, oh man. All right. But it got stranger. As the conversation moved to Sabbath observance, he said, "Well, you know, the book says money's more important than religion because you got to eat. And Saturday is our busiest day." Now, I don't know what book he was reading. I got a witness, don't I? The book that I have says this, Exodus 31. Shemot chapter 31. I want to tell you his name. He had a good German name, but I'm not going to tell you his name. He might have repented of all that by now. Exodus 31, verse 12. "And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, And you speak to the children of Israel, saying, My Sabbaths you are to," there's that word again, "guard by all means. For it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, and to know that I, Yahweh, am setting you apart, and you shall guard the Sabbath, for it is set apart to you. Everyone who profanes it shall certainly be put to death, for anyone who does work on it, that being shall be cut off from among his people." That doesn't sound like money is more important than religion does it, 6 days work is done, and on the seventh day is a Sabbath of rest set apart to Yahweh. Everyone doing work on the Sabbath day shall certainly be put to death. And the children of Yisrael shall guard the Sabbath to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations as an everlasting covenant between me and the children of Yisrael. It is a sign forever. For in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day He rested and was refreshed. What was He thinking? I don't know. But obviously, He had not suited up with the helmet of deliverance and the breastplate of righteousness. And because of this, he, like Hawa, was deceived and convinced that there were acceptable reasons for doing what they wanted to do rather than obeying the word of Elohim. Amen. So why did I tell you about this fellow? Is it so that we can collectively sit in judgment of his actions and shake our heads in unison? And all say together, shame, 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 shame. No, the reason that I share this is because we all suffer from stinking thinking from time to time. And this gentleman cannot see that he is in gross transgression. Hawa did not see that she was in gross transgression. Proverbs 24. We're going to start reading in verse 30. This one strikes me every time I read it. Proverbs 24, verse 30. I passed by the field of the lazy and by the vineyard of a man lacking heart, and see, it was all overgrown with thorns. Its surface was covered with nettles, and its stone wall was broken down. And when I saw it, I set my heart on it. I looked and received discipline. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and your poverty shall come, a prowler, and your need like an armed man. And go back to verse 30. I passed by the field of the lazy and by the vineyard of the man lacking heart. Could we say that I had an opportunity that day to pass by the field of the lazy and the vineyard of a man lacking heart? Yeah. When I was talking to the glass man. Verse 31. And see, it was all overgrown with thorns. Its surface was covered with nettles, and its stone wall was broken down. He was not even diligently observing the religion that he said that he loved. And when I saw it, I set my heart on it. In other words, I thought about what I had just experienced. I looked and received discipline. That is why I tell you this story. Not to be judgmental, but to see where you and I might get discipline from it. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and your poverty shall come, a prowler, and your need like what? An armed man. Like an armed man. So disturbing was this story. But let us ask ourselves, what can we glean from this man's overgrown garden? How well are we tending our own fields of devotion towards Yahweh? Because of our own laziness, are we allowing our own to become overgrown with thorns and covered with nettles, and that it chokes the fruit of the vine? Have we allowed our stone walls of righteousness become broken down? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and your poverty, in this case the loss of our treasure in heaven, shall come, a prowler, and your need like an armed man. And if you don't have on the complete armor of Elohim when that armed man of temptation comes along, you know what you're going to do? You'll either lay down or get knocked down, because you will not be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. Either way, you'll be smitten. However, when we take up the helmet of deliverance and the breastplate of righteousness, we have two very important defensive tools in place to be proactive and think about what needs to be done in order to live righteously before Yahweh, so that the armed man, when he comes, we can stand. All right? And he won't be able to take away our treasure in the field. One verse, Matthew 13:44, Yeshua is talking about what the reign of the heavens is like. And he says, "Again, the reign of the heavens is like a treasure hidden in a field, which a man having found it hid. And for joy over it, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field." Who's he hiding this treasure from? Those he loves? Or is he protecting it from a robber, an armed man of the devil who would take it from him? I think most certainly it is the latter. All right? We must protect our minds from the garbage of the world. All right? Just one verse here too. I'll read this to you. We're familiar with it. Deuteronomy 7:26 says, "And do not bring an abomination into your house, lest you be accursed like it. Utterly loathe it and utterly hate it, for it is accursed." Abominations come in many forms, and yes, this passage is speaking specifically about idolatry, about idols of gold and silver and the silver that's on them. However, do we think that we can bring other abominations into the house without being accursed like them? I think not. When we sit in front of the TV, well, I was talking about this with a friend once, and he asked this question: would you let a naked man in the house to just walk around in front of your wife and your children in nothing but his underwear? Of course, the answer is, well, no. Then why would you let him walk around in your television set in your living room? What a great point, amen. When we sit in front of the TV, listen to the radio, the computer, books and magazines, do we put on the helmet of deliverance and the breastplate of righteousness, or do we take them off and entertain ourselves with visions and sounds and subject matters which Yahweh has said in His Torah are abominations, even things which carry the death penalty? Things that enter by way of the eyes and the ears, going into the mind and ultimately into the heart. Do not bring an abomination into your house, lest you be accursed like it. Utterly loathe it, utterly hate it, for it is accursed. How can we do that while wearing the helmet of deliverance and the breastplate of righteousness? Truth is, we can't. Romans chapter 1. Page 1086. I'm going to start reading in verse 18. Romans chapter 1 and verse 18. "For the wrath of Elohim is revealed from heaven against all wickedness and unrighteousness of men, who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because that which is known of Elohim is manifest among them, for Elohim has manifested it to them. For since the creation of the world, His invisible qualities have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, both His everlasting power and mightiness, for them to be without excuse, because although they knew Elohim, they did not esteem Him as Elohim, nor gave thanks, but became vain in their reasonings, and their undiscerning heart was darkened." We reason with our mind, and the heart becomes dark. "Claiming to be wise, they became fools. They changed the esteem of the incorruptible Elohim into the likeness of an image corruptible man, and of birds, and of four-footed beasts, and of reptiles. Therefore Elohim gave them up to uncleanliness in the lust of their hearts, to disrespect their bodies among themselves, who changed the truth of Elohim into the falsehood, and worshiped and served what was created rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. Because of this, Elohim gave them over to degrading passions. For even their women exchanged natural relations for what is against nature. And likewise, the men also, having left natural relations with women, burned in their lust for one another, men with men committing indecency and receiving back the reward which was due for their straying. Sounds like a place that we know nearby, doesn't it? It's this place right out here. All right? And even as they did not think it worthwhile to possess what? The knowledge of Elohim. Elohim gave them over to a worthless mind to do what is improper, having been filled with all unrighteousness, whoring, wickedness, greed, evil, filled with envy, murder, fighting, deceit, evil habits, whisperers, slanderers, haters of Elohim, insolent, proud, boasters, devisers of evils, disobedient to parents, without discernment, covenant breakers, unloving, unforgiving, ruthless, who, though they know the righteousness of Elohim, that those who practice such deserve death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. Do you see why you have to have on the complete armor of Elohim? It's where we live. It is where we live. Mark chapter 7. We're going to start reading in verse 20. We'll be on page 963. Mark chapter 7, verse 20. And he said, "What comes out of a man, that defiles a man, for from within, out of the heart of men, proceed evil reasonings, adulteries, whorings, murders, thefts, greedy desires, wickedness, deceit, indecency, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these wicked matters come from within and defile a man." In Matthew chapter 12. Let's start reading in verse 33 on page 930. Matthew 12, verse 33. "Either make the tree good and its fruit good, or else make the tree rotten and its fruit rotten. For a tree is known by its fruit. Brood of adders, how are you able to speak what is good being wicked? For the mouth speaks from the overflow of the heart. The good man brings forth what is good from the good treasure of his heart, and the wicked man brings forth what is wicked from the wicked treasure of his heart." Do you see the breastplate of righteousness right there? The good treasures of his heart. "And I say to you that every idle word men speak, they shall give an account of it in the day of judgment. For by your words you shall be declared righteous, and by your words you shall be declared unrighteous." You know what they say, garbage in, garbage out. The helmet of deliverance and the breastplate of righteousness protect against bringing abominations into our physical houses, yes, but also this temporary tent of our bodies, and against the further corruption of our heads and hearts. We hope to clean up all that we can, but if you're like most of us, there is already stuff in there that it's going to take a major house cleaning by Yahweh. So we certainly need to guard to keep our heads and our hearts from getting any worse. Amen? Talk to Yahweh about where you are vulnerable in your heart and in your mind, and be diligent in your preparation for battle. Hasatan is not going to hit you in the areas where you're strong. He is going to hit you in your soft spots that you don't even realize are unprotected in many cases. All right? There's only one person who you or I can expect to have any real prospects of straightening out. That person is myself for me or yourself for you. I fight against even my own desires to do better, and without Yahweh and Yahshua, I'm hopeless on my own. I'll just bet you have the same dilemma as did Paul. Romans 7. I'm going to start reading verse 14, page 1092. Romans 7, verse 14. For we know that the Torah is spiritual, but I am fleshly, sold under sin. For what I work I know not, for that what I wish, that I do not practice. But what I hate, that I do. Anybody relate? But if I do what I do not wish, I agree with the Torah that it is good. And now it is no longer I that work it, but the sin dwelling in me. For I know that in me, that is in my flesh, dwells no good. For to wish is present with me, but to work the good I do not find. For the good that I wish to do, I do not do, but the evil I do not wish to do, this I practice. And if I do that which I do not wish, it is no longer I who work it, but the sin dwelling in me. I find therefore this law, that when I wish to do the good, that the evil is present with me. For I delight in the Torah of Elohim according to the inward man. But I see another law in my members, battling, there's that word, battling against the Torah of my mind and bringing me into captivity to the law of sin, which is in my members. Wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from this body of death? Thanks to Elohim through Yahshua, Messiah, our Master. So then, with the mind, I truly serve the Torah of Elohim, but with the flesh, the law of sin. This fight is a fight to the end, and one that we must stay in constant preparation for. I'm talking about some diligent, persistent introspection. I'm not talking about some flippant chit-chat here. We need to get some quiet time and talk to Yahweh. And sometimes we may need to reach out to other people and ask them something like, can you give me a little feedback on how you perceive me? Can you tell me where I'm doing well and where you see that I might be needing to tighten up or need to do a little extra work? If you go to a trusted brother or sister about something like that, you can get some valuable information. Talk to Yahweh and ask Him to reveal the places where you are vulnerable, because we are all vulnerable. The places where Hasatan can work his schemes in your life, and Yahweh will reveal them to you. Yahweh's been dealing with me in some places in my heart which makes me especially vulnerable to manipulation into Satan's schemes. Would you like to know what it is? I'm not going to tell you. Any of you at home sitting on the edge of your seat, I'm not going to tell you. I told you that I'm the only one I can clean up. I hope to clean up some thorns and nettles in my vineyard and do a little repair on my stone wall before the next time someone passes by. But I can tell you that it has already this week saved me from falling for a scheme that would normally have suckered me right in. And that is something that would have started a snowball effect that Hasatan could have used to wage war on multiple levels. Isaiah 55. YHWH. .55. We're going to start reading in verse 6 on page 456. Isaiah 55, verse 6. Seek Yahweh while He is to be found. Call on Him while He is near. Yahshua said the reign of Elohim is drawn near, okay? So we don't need to lose sight of that. Let the wrong forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. Let him return to Yahweh, who has compassion on him, and to our Elohim, for He pardons much. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares Yahweh. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. For as the rain comes down and the snow from the heavens, and do not return there, but water the earth and make it bring forth and bud, and give seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so is my word that goes forth from my mouth. It does not return to me empty, but shall do what I please, and I shall certainly accomplish what I sent it for. For with joy you go out, and with peace you are brought in. The mountains and the hills break forth into singing before you, and all the trees of the field clap their hands. Remember the lazy man's field? Instead of the thorn, the cypress comes up, and instead of the nettle, the myrtle comes up. And it shall be to Yahweh for a name, for an everlasting sign which is not cut off. I praise Yahweh for His armor, but we must put it on. It's going to do us any good. If we do, we can stand against the schemes of the devil and defeat the armed man. Put on the helmet of deliverance, the word of Yahweh in our minds, and the breastplate of righteousness, the will and the ways of Yahweh in our hearts. We'll continue further at the complete armor of Elohim in our next message, but until then, watch You Topknot. Yevrekeka Yahweh va'ishmareka ya'er Yahweh panavaleka bikaneka yasa Yahweh panavaleka biasem lakas shalom. Yahweh bless you and guard you. Yahweh make His face to shine upon you and show favor to you. Yahweh lift up His face upon you and give you His complete contentment.
Hey, hey, and He can make a way. Hey, hey, so humble yourself and pray and guard His Torah.